But I just want to say thanks so much to everyone who has been here, to many of you who have devoted so much attention over the past few days. We're having a party tonight. I expect to see you all there, dressed to the nines. It's at 7. There's food and drink and probably some kind of amazing over-the-top entertainment. I'm going to talk. I'm going to talk for a little bit here. I'm going to put a bow on it. I'm going to say some things that are kind of random, but also that I think will sort of sum up the experience. But when I'm done talking, this isn't the last presentation of the event overall. Danelle will be giving a final keynote down at on the main stage. So I hope that you can all really listen to me and think about how great what I'm about to tell you is, and just be like, whoa, my mind is blown. But then even though your mind is blown, go downstairs, check out Danelle. It will be a nice, also, it'll be like a bow on a bow. All right. Adios, Plaza, Soroban, where we go from here. This is the name of the talk. Where do we go from here? Well, I wanted to start with this quote, which is in Spanish. I don't actually speak Spanish. I'll leave it up there for anyone who does. But this kind of goes back to where we started. This is where I started at the beginning of when I was up here with Tomer and Jed, was with a quote from Don Quixote. So this quote, only one who attempts the absurd is capable of achieving the impossible. A bit more inspirational, right? And I sort of pulled this quote because, like I was saying, when I check out a new city when I'm coming to Madrid, I'll read up. I'll read, here I read Leaving the Atocha Station. I read Hemingway. I read Cervantes. I was digging through Don Quixote, which again is, sort of this story of this somewhat delusional hidalgo who goes out into the world, and he sort of finds some rusty armor in the basement. He believes that he is a knight errant, and he starts doing these daring deeds, to improve the world. But what's kind of amazing about it, I didn't get into this before, is that in his delusion and living out his delusion, he actually kind of does make the world a better place, right? The world sort of comes around to his point of view. He actually kind of conjures magic and brings back some chivalry. And so I thought, okay, there's something about Don Quixote that is absurd, but it is all about achieving the impossible. And I thought, hey, this is a relevant quote, right? The truth is that actually I started looking for this quote in Don Quixote, and I could not for the life of me find it. And I searched, and I ended up getting a Project Gutenberg version, so I actually searched. And that's because this isn't from Don Quixote. This is actually something that, in my mind, and if you Google this quote, people will tell you it's from Don Quixote. It's not, right? This is from a second text that was written in 1905, so 300 years after Don Quixote. It's about Don Quixote. It's by someone named Miguel de Unamuno, the first parts of the name are right. He's writing about Don Quixote. So part of the reason I mention this is that, today we're here, this is the Soroban stage. Soroban, right? This feels distinct from Stellar, right? It feels like, hey, we've got this new thing, and there's this old thing, and classic Stellar and Soroban. But I think part of the question about what happens next is in a month, in 3 months, in 6 months, in 3 years, in 300 years. I think the idea that these are two separate texts, Stellar and Soroban, they're sort of going to merge, right? This might as well be from Don Quixote. At some point, it's the idea that comes together that's useful, and I think that is what we're going to start to see with Soroban, right? Soroban and Stellar will become one and the same, in a way, right? We'll see. But part of the reason I put this here is because, hey, look, it's a quote that gives us something that sort of speaks to the moment, right? As I mentioned in the earlier talk, we do get the word quixotic from Don Quixote. So I think I wrote it down here, quijotesco in Spanish, right? So quixotic. And if you look it up, there's sort of a impractical. You're foolishly impractical in the pursuit of ideas if you're quixotic. But like I said, I actually think there's more to it. You're very hopeful. You sort of don't care about what the odds are. You are tenacious, even as things are breaking, right? And I think that level of determination, that notion of a quixoticism, is what makes you, capable of achieving the impossible when you attempt the absurd. So obviously this year, I think that, everyone who was building on Soroban managed to try something absurd, to work with code that wasn't done, to work through preview releases, to do it in a brand new ecosystem, right? To leave other ecosystems or to come to fresh, to blockchain or whatever, and to agree to work somewhere where just things are still in motion, right? And I think that in doing it, quixotically, kind of did manage to conjure magic, right? Kind of did, looking around at the interactions, manage to revive a little bit of chivalry, So, you know, well done, right? Thank you. Thank you to everyone, right? I think, though, where do we go from here? That's the topic. Well, I think before we can say where we go from here, I just want to say where we are now. Where are we now? So obviously we're in Madrid. We're in the birthplace of Cervantes, right? We're at Meridian. We're at Plaza Soroban. This is the 20th presentation on this stage. So many were so technical, went so deep. 20, right? That's a lot. That's where we are. Right now, we're also at the last talk on this stage, the second to last talk before the festivities, right? Before we all come together, sort of celebrate. And a lot of people are here for the first time, right? So we're here before we celebrate for the first time. We're having a moment. And I think it's like a good time to reflect, okay? What did you hear on this stage, right? At the beginning, I said there were sort of 3 categories. I'm kind of going to return to that here, but Soroban is technically sweet. The Soroban ecosystem is alive and kicking. And Stellar and Soroban equals cash plus DeFi. So I kind of want to go back to those categories and just reminisce, reflect, right? So Soroban, I actually am relying heavily on ampersands here, so I went with is both sweet and salty. I think at this point there's more depth to it. It's not just sweet. It's 2 flavors, right? So you learned about that, right? You learned about the host and guest, right? You learned about the division that adds security, interoperability, performance. You learned about metering and about fees, how the fine-grained fees that are built into Soroban take into account actual resource usage for CPU and I/O and an actual transaction size, right? Bandwidth. How this keeps pricing fair, how it allows for a more efficient usage of resources. You'll see the ampersand continues, right? You learn about storage and about state expiration, right? Like there's a novel design built into Soroban to prevent the state bloat from happening. It allows ledger size to like sort of stay small so the network can scale so it's easy to participate. You learned about the storage solutions that give developers control over it, that allow them to choose how they interact and how they determine whether or not their transactions can be revived once they are expired, right? You learned about fuzzing and testing, right? You learned about the things that are built into Soroban that actually make testing easier. You actually saw a mental demo from someone who wrote the fuzzing scripts. You learned all about these things that are sort of the batteries included developer experience. You know, all of this plus whatever, the sort of well-designed approach to authorization that allows for account abstraction. All of these things that are available right now out of the box, Soroban tech is sweet and salty. On the ecosystem side, right, the Soroban ecosystem is alive and kicking. I feel like I've said that too many times, but you know, it's going to stick, right? It is alive and kicking. On the Barrio blockchain stage, there were 40 projects that presented. 40 out of, I don't know, 100 that I know of that are building on Soroban, but there are probably a lot more, right? First wave devs creating these building blocks, even though the platform is coming together around us, under our feet. You learned about still more ampersands, tools and resources, right? The IDEs, the educational programs, the smart contract libraries, the things that make it easier for developers to build. You learned about indexers and oracles, right? Data, things that organize data that allow people to either pull data from the chain or to interact with off-chain data in order to execute smart contracts. You learned about swaps and AMMs just now, right? Like where liquidity provision becomes democratized, where cross-border payments can sort of have this engine in the middle with better liquidity because of it. You learned about lending and borrowing, right? This DeFi primitive that opens up access, that gives people in markets that don't necessarily have it access to capital when they need it. And that in turn gives people who have extra capital the ability to deposit it, right? To become lenders, to actually grow their capital, actually grow wealth. Like these things are not just ideas, and these aren't just the building blocks of an ecosystem. These things are the building blocks of any ecosystem, of the Soroban ecosystem, and they are here right now. Like these people that were standing up here, they have, many of them, prototypes of all of these things, and the day that mainnet launches, right, they're going to be ready to turn those on. It will be time. It's alive and kicking that ecosystem. On the opportunity side, right, so this is sort of where Soroban is cash to DeFi. This is where access meets innovation, right? You sort of learned about not just what the Soroban ecosystem is up to, not just the technical depth of Soroban, but you actually learned how you can write your first smart contract, right? You saw that live coded. You saw how to build your first Stellar dApp end-to-end, how to connect it to a front end, how to use the TypeScript bindings, right? How Stellar can DeFi, and so can you. You also learned more ampersands, assets and tokens, right? How Stellar assets are held in trust lines, but Soroban tokens don't necessarily need them, but also how to issue and wrap, how you can issue tokens on Stellar, easily wrap them using a built-in Stellar asset contract, right? You learned about, how you can on-ramp and deploy those assets, how you can take something like MoneyGram that Beans gives you access to, and you can actually deploy that asset once you've on-ramped it from Cash right into the Blend protocol, right? And ultimately, it is about Cash and DeFi, right? So suddenly, the Cash access, the worldwide Anchor network that connects to Stellar, because of this immediate interoperability, because of the Stellar asset contract, because it's you can see how these two things sort of meet at the asset level. Like, you can suddenly see how in the Stellar ecosystem, right, there's going to be a novel opportunity for people to open up access to DeFi in markets where it's never been available before, right? That's pretty cool. Where we are now. But where we are now is just to get us where we're going next, right? Where we go next. Where do we go next? This is literally where I'm going next, right? This is a famous painting. It's hanging at the Museo del Prado, right? Las Meninas, the ladies in waiting. Velázquez, I wrote it down, 1656, right? I'm going to go tomorrow, and I am going to stand in front of this painting. It's the Infanta Margaret Teresa, her entourage, her chaperone, two dwarves, a dog. Velázquez is there. You can sort of see him looking and painting. He's looking right at you, the viewer. In the background, you could kind of see the king and queen reflected in the mirror. You know, at the time that this painting came out, it was a technological marvel. People looked at it and they were like, whoa, that is the coolest example of easel painting I've ever seen in my life. It captures everything, the level of detail, the fact that you can put all these different people in there, that you can have all these different interactions, that Velázquez is looking at you and incorporating you, the viewer, like blew people's minds, right? They did not understand the potential of easel painting, and there wasn't a lot else to do, right? Obviously, a lot has happened since then. The Industrial Revolution, photography, motion pictures, databases, blockchain, right? But tomorrow, I'm literally going to stand in front of this painting, and I'm going to sort of put myself in the shoes of a 17th century viewer. I'm just going to try to let it blow my mind, right? And when I do it, I'm kind of going to think back to this moment, like this moment here where we are standing, looking at a new technology, and it feels really mind-blowing, right? We have a full entourage of people here. We are all looking at this new technology, and I think we're kind of in this Las Meninas moment, right, with Soroban. By the way, I think I'd be the Mastiff. But where we go next? I'm going there, but where we go next? For real. Sort of same model here with the tech. Where do we go next with Soroban tech? Well, from preview to production, right? Testnet launched last week. We're now closing in on mainnet. When is mainnet? When is mainnet? This year, right? It's soon. Here's what I can tell you. The testnet is running right now, capital T testnet, with release candidates of Stellar Core and Horizon. As soon as there are sort of stable releases of those two pieces of software, we're going to basically start a timer and say, hey, validators, we'd like to schedule a vote 6 weeks from this moment. So mainnet, 6 weeks after stable releases come out, validators will likely vote on the Protocol 20 upgrade, right? So moving from preview to production. We are moving from an MVP to sort of a killer developer experience, right? There's been so much focus on core components, on the sort of technically sweet design decisions, and now there's more on focus on drilling down on sanding out the rough edges, on trying to prevent all of the breakages. You know, if you were here, you heard a lot of people say one of the biggest challenges was this constant stream of releases, was having to go back and fix things. Well, we're getting to the point where we're stabilizing, and now we can make it a killer DevX, right? We're moving from V1 to V2. So Soroban mainnet launch does not stop development. The initial design is built to allow the introduction of things like parallel processing, right, to help ensure scalability. And after that, there's all these paths that we could follow. I mean, Nico, in his talk, he was basically like, I don't know, ZK, zero knowledge infrastructure. We could do that. We could do SpeedX, right? We could work on payment channels. But whatever that future is, like anyone here, you're like moving from V1 to V2, it's gonna happen because of what you're building, because of what you're doing, and because of feedback that you give. But what's next with the Soroban tech? At some point, we're moving from V1 to V2. With the ecosystem, we're moving from minimum viable to a virtuous cycle. So like internally, we basically said, all right, we've got this heuristic, which is a minimum viable ecosystem that's helping us keep track of development. And the basic idea was that we kind of wanted 3 of every key building block to exist in the ecosystem. And I think that we're at a point now where it's kind of time to change that heuristic, right? Soon, all those building blocks, the latent potential, it will be activated. Protocols will offer opportunities to lend and borrow, provide capital, right, swap. And all those opportunities are going to attract users who will in turn bring capital. And that will actually make the protocols more efficient, which will attract more users, who will bring more capital. Virtuous cycle. That's what we're moving into. The ecosystem. Projects are moving from development to launch. So many projects so far along right now, they deployed on FutureNet, they're deploying on testnet, and I think that just talking to so many of you, like you are planning to be ready on or around mainnet launch. Ecosystem is moving from development to launch. We're going to go from 100 projects, that's how many I know of roughly that are building on Soroban, to 1,000. That's my goal, right? So as projects launch and succeed, I think that they'll sort of beget more projects. They'll attract more projects, right? It's a rising tide kind of scenario. The more projects, the more people building, the more vibrant the ecosystem, the more opportunities there are to interoperate, to attract users, to create this virtual cycle. And we'll go from building blocks to end-to-end solutions. We've already started to see this today, right? Like so many financial primitives exist, oracles, indexers. These tools are there, and they're starting to get assembled. And it's something that looks like the beans to blend, like sort of end-to-end user experience that we saw. So that's the Soroban ecosystem from minimum viable to virtuous cycle. The Soroban opportunity, right? We're going from Stellar and Soroban, these 2 things, to Stellar plus Soroban. They get married, right? As Stellar and Soroban combine forces, right, there are going to be these new opportunities to realize, right? So, liquidity, provision, and lending are actually going to meet exchange and borrowing in order to allow this sort of like ultimate exchange of assets, to allow Stellar to realize its potential as a universal platform for universal asset conversion. We're going to see, again, like sort of cash actually connect to DeFi. Again, this is an idea, something that people are excited about. This will be the moment when it actually happens. And we're going to see $8 million in awards in 2023. I actually want to dig into that. So $8 million in awards in 2023. So this has like kind of come up a lot, but I actually just wanted to stand here at this moment because I think this talk about part of what is going to happen next does have to do with like how does the money keep getting distributed that is designed to support the growth of Soroban, the growth of the Soroban ecosystem, right? So I want to say like in 2023, we gave away $8 million in awards to over 100 projects in over 20 project categories. That's that minimum viable ecosystem idea. In over 40 countries, over the course of 9 very fast rounds, 1 a month of the Open Application Grants Program, which means that we're giving away about 10 awards every month. Now, all of this was done very deliberately. Like, we sort of talked to the ecosystem before designing the program, before like turning on this high velocity. And we sort of based on feedback, we scoped down the program to cover 2 to 3 months of development costs, right? And based, again, on that input, we decided to sort of distribute them to as many qualified projects as possible. So the goal this year has not been to pick winning horses. It has basically been to pick horses, right? Get every horse in the race. If you're a bicycle, you cannot come into the race. If you're a hippopotamus, no. A cup of coffee, no. But if you are a horse, come on into the race. We will support you to do it. 2 to 3 months of development costs, right? It's a strategy that I think is paying off, and I think you can like look around this room and feel the energy of the first wave builders and sort of see, all right, this makes sense. This is a good way to start to bootstrap an ecosystem. But like, if you remember last year at Meridian, we said, we sort of flashed this big number on the screen. It was $100 million. So we have allocated $100 million to the Soroban Adoption Fund. And $100 million is a lot. it's a lot. Like at the current rate, okay, we will, if we continue to do what we're doing, we will likely distribute about $10 million in awards through the Stellar Community Fund in 2023. And I think at this stage in ecosystem development, that makes sense, right? We've still been in preview release. We're still early builders, still early development. And I actually think that's a strategy that makes sense to me to stick with. Like, we want to keep getting people going. We want to keep people coming into the ecosystem. But it's also time to start to figure out what to do next with that money. I mean, there's still going to be a lot of money left over. I think it would be good if we don't take 10 years to distribute it, if we try to accelerate. But I think it's really important to be deliberate. And I think that you can start to see places where we are finding ways to accelerate the distribution of those funds in a way that actually does something new. So Tomer, for instance, at the main stage on the first day, he announced the Soroban Audit Bank. So this is a way that we can allocate some of those funds to give to projects to cover the costs of their audits. We're trying to get 20 done, like give them to the first 20 projects that merit audits very, very quickly. So if you need an audit, please contact us, right? And I think that that is one thing that we are going to do like next for sure. And I think if you listen to Anka up here, she got into the future of community funding, which is like improving governance, getting more people and giving more power to the community to help distribute those funds. But like, that's only the beginning. You know, I think that over the course of the next couple of years, we're going to have to find ways to actually deploy more capital, to give more gas to the protocols that are building. And what that looks like, I wish that I could follow this up with a slide that broke it all down for you, but at the same time, I can't, right? What I need now is for more feedback from people about how we should continue to distribute the Soroban Adoption Fund. Like, I think what we've done right now is deliberate. I think an audit bank is a great idea. What next? And I think in general, you know, what next is a question that I'm throwing back to you, right? What should you do next is not a question that I can answer. It's a question that you sort of have to answer. And what I should do next, what the foundation should do next, what the ecosystem should do next, that's up to you, right? I think that, for me, the advice for the very next step is to enjoy the fact that you're together, right? Like, you're here together for the first time. It's kind of like, I don't know, the CBGBs in the 1970s or the Apollo missions, right? It is the beginning of something, and we're all sort of here to contribute to its evolution, and something great's going to come out of it, right? I think it'd be good to sort of find your Las Meninas moment, whatever it is. Like, mine will be to look at that painting and to think back over the past couple of days. But I think you should look back, right? Capture the feeling that you have. Think about what it was that you learned at this conference. And then, you know, make sure to keep interacting. Join the Discord. Start talking to people. Join every discussion you can. Like, communicate, over-communicate, ask questions. Tell me what we should do with the, you know, to accelerate the distribution of the Soroban Adoption Fund. You know, I think it's actually a rare time when you can make a difference. Every voice can make a difference in sort of the development of the direction of the entire ecosystem. And I think, you know, I think it's a time when dissent is welcome, even encouraged. Like, we want to hear from everyone, and we want people to disagree, and we want to fight through those disagreements to come to some sort of consensus, right? And I think that sort of everyone who is working in this room, right, like everyone who is working to unlock human potential through collaboration, through quixotic devotion to possibility, well, I think our goal should be to launch Soroban and the Soroban ecosystem not as an object at rest, but as an object in motion, right, with the inertia already necessary to keep it moving forward, like to keep it going, pick up speed, make sure it never stops moving. And so I'm going to end kind of where I began with a quote from Don Quixote: hands to the work, for in delay, there's apt to be danger. Thanks, everybody.